Today, we're diving into a truly wild story from 1986, where celebrity glamour and international espionage collided in the most spectacular way. It's the story of a beloved TV star who was hiding a secret so big it threatened to bring a whole nation to its knees. So that brings us to the central question, right? How on earth does a country's biggest star, their most admired celebrity, secretly become one of its most dangerous enemies? That's the mystery we're going to unravel. All right, so picture this. The year is 1986. We're in Kuwait. And on TV screens all across the Gulf, there's this incredibly famous Iraqi actress. She is at the absolute top of her game, a total household name. But what no one knows is that she's concealing a truly shocking secret. And this is where it gets crazy. You've got these two completely different realities. On one hand, her public image, she was a beloved actress, a TV icon, the national sweetheart. But behind the curtain, a totally different person. She was a master spy, the ringleader of a whole spy network, and an agent working for Saddam Hussein. So you have to ask, how did she get so much influence? To understand that, we've got to rewind the clock a little, back to the early 1980s, and take a look at her meteoric rise to fame. A rise that, when you look back on it now, was just a little too perfect. And get this, her most iconic role is actually what gave this whole scandal its name. She played the Masked Rider, a character that audiences absolutely adored. The irony, of course, is just, wow, the mask she wore on screen was nothing compared to the one she was wearing in her real life. You know, looking back, all the little red flags were there. From the very start of her career, she was getting cast in these huge lead roles, which is pretty unusual for a newcomer. It always seemed like she had some kind of powerful, invisible support. Any official paperwork she had to do, it all just flew through the system with suspicious speed. Her massive popularity wasn't just a career boost, it turned out to be the perfect cover. And all that fame, it wasn't just from magazine covers and talk shows, no. She weaponized it. She used it to run a really sophisticated espionage method, specifically targeting Kuwait's most powerful and influential people. Her strategy was basically a four-step playbook, and it was brilliant in its simplicity. First, become a huge star so that everybody trusts and admires you. Second, use that status to throw these exclusive, glamorous parties. Third, carefully pick your guest list to include high-value targets. And finally, use that access to gather state secrets for Saddam's regime. Now, this tactic actually has a name. It's one of the oldest tricks in the spy book. It's called the honey trap. That's where you use charm, social access, maybe even romance to compromise your targets and get information. And with her celebrity status, well, she was the perfect person to pull it off. And just who was she targeting? Well, this wasn't random. Her guest list was a who's who of Kuwait's most sensitive sectors. We're talking about influential media personalities, high-ranking military officers, officials from the Interior Ministry, basically anyone with access to classified government information. But an operation this audacious, you just can't keep it a secret forever. By the mid-1980s, the Kuwaiti authorities were starting to get suspicious. And so, slowly but surely, they started to close the net around her. So here's how it all went down. After her incredible rise to fame, by about 1985, these suspicious reports about her started reaching the security services. Then, in 1986, they got their big break. They managed to plant a source on the inside, someone close to her. And the final move came later that same year, when security forces raided her apartment, right in the middle of one of her parties, and arrested her on the spot. But her arrest wasn't the end of the story, not even close. It was actually the beginning of something way bigger. Because in that interrogation room, the mask finally came off, and her entire spy network began to completely unravel. Under questioning, she didn't just confess, she dropped an absolute bombshell. 3 simple, chilling words. We are spies. No denial, no hesitation. She knew the game was up. And when she said we, she meant a massive network, a large ring of non-Kuwaiti agents, people from Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, who had infiltrated deep into Kuwaiti society. We're talking journalists. They found 4 or 5 agents working in a single newspaper, plus military personnel and other agents in really sensitive government jobs.
As you can imagine, this sparked a huge diplomatic crisis. The Iraqi embassy, acting for Saddam's regime, tried to step in and shut the whole investigation down. But it was just too late. The scandal was way too big, and the evidence was too overwhelming to be swept under the rug.
Kuwait's response was fast and decisive. It was a two-pronged approach. For the agents that they had dead to rights with solid evidence, the result was prison. For the others, where the evidence was a little thinner, and that included the actress herself because she cooperated, the action was immediate deportation. They were put on planes and sent right out of the country. But even after all that, the story of the masked rider left a long, lingering shadow over the whole region. It revealed that this wasn't some isolated incident. It was part of a wider, really disturbing pattern of using cultural figures for espionage. The real long-term damage was how this case completely shattered the idea that art and politics were separate things. It created this lasting paranoia, and it forced people to ask themselves if the media they were consuming and the artists they admired could actually be tools for a foreign government. And this really wasn't a one-off thing. A few years later, during the 1990 Gulf War, even more artists who had collaborated with the Iraqi regime were exposed. You can see right here the actress Zaneb al-Dahi was sentenced, served her time, and was deported. Another well-known male actor faced a similar fate. The pattern was just undeniable. This quote really captures that deep sense of public betrayal. I mean, can you imagine turning on your TV and realizing the very people giving speeches about patriotism were secretly working to undermine your country? It was a complete shock to the public's trust. And all of this leads to a final, lingering thought. The masked rider was exposed decades ago, but the methods she used, leveraging fame, influence, and the media, are more powerful today than they have ever been. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our modern world of screens and stars, who else is hiding behind a mask?